Do you have any speculations of the source of this new virus?
You know, if you look at what the other coronaviruses did, they both originated in bats, and then bats infected an intermediate host. With SARS, it was the palm civet cat and a raccoon dog that when people sacrificed them at ceremonial feasts, they would eat them as special delicacies, that's how it jumped species. With mares, it's generally felt it also originated in a bat, infects a camel, and people who work close with camels, hence the Middle East respiratory syndrome. We don't know what the original source is here, but I would not be surprised if it's a bat and the bat is secondarily infecting other animals. We don't know, it hasn't been identified. But if it acts like the other two coronaviruses, I wouldn't be surprised.
So we know that the transmission from human to human of this coronavirus is confirmed. How serious this transmission is going to be? Do you think it's going to be? I mean, do you think that coronavirus would be mutating during this transmission from human to human?
Well, coronaviruses, like any RNA viruses, tend to mutate. The question is, does the mutation have a functional relevance? Because viruses, particularly those that replicate a lot because they spread from a lot of people, tend to evolve. This one looks pretty stable. So it's not one that looks like it's rapidly changing with mutations. So I don't anticipate that this is something that's going to all of a sudden have a dramatic change in its function, what we call its phenotype. I don't think that's going to happen, but you have to be prepared for anything.
Hmm. So um, do you think that coronavirus is less pathogenic that I mean in comparison with MERS and SARC?
Thus far, it looks less serious in the sense of hospitalizations, serious disease, and death. For example, right now, even though we're still early in the process, the mortality is approximately 3.5 to 4%. With SARS, it was about 9 or 10%. With MERS, it was about 30%.
Mm.
So right now, it looks like it is more mild than those two, but we have to be careful we don't make any definitive statements until we get more experience.
What about the super spreaders?
Well, you know, there were super spreaders with SARS and super spreaders with MERS. There's one incident that happened in a Wuhan hospital that suggests that there is this concept of a super spreader with this new virus, and that we've seen that when 15 healthcare workers in a Wuhan hospital were infected by a person who very likely was a super spreader.
Mhm. What about like do you see any like can you predict something about this new coronavirus? Will it be spreading? Will it be like very extremely dangerous, or will it be diminishing because it's like winter in Asia right now? It's the virus is active, not that active, I would say, like
Oh,
in the northern periods.
I think we have it opposite. When you're in winter and you have closed, crowded places with people coughing and sneezing, that makes it more likely that it would spread
Uh-huh.
when you're dealing with respiratory illnesses. So, but in answer to your direct question, I think it's impossible to predict just what the extent of this is going to be on public health. It really is premature to say these viruses have a way of evolving, sometimes predictable, sometimes not. I think we have to just watch it carefully and be prepared to respond in a way that you contain and mitigate, you prevent its spread, and you take care of it when it does infect people.
What about the vaccines that NIH developing right now to fight?
You know,
Uh-huh.
the NIH is developing a vaccine that we hope will be able to test for safety within the next 3 months. We're not the only group that's developing a vaccine. A number of companies are trying to, but we have a pretty good core of people whose specialty is making these vaccines in response to outbreaks. And they're projecting our group that by the next 3 months we'll be able to begin testing it in humans.
Mhm. How to define if person is like is sick, is being is having this coronavirus? What are the first symptoms?
Yeah, well, it's a typical flu-like syndrome. It's associated with fever, it's cough, difficulty breathing, respiratory distress, and when they get seriously ill, they can wind up getting what we call pulmonary infiltrates. And some individuals, a relatively small percentage, but enough to be concerned, often require respirators to help them to breathe. And as I mentioned, there have been at least 17 documented deaths thus far.
How to protect ourselves from this coronaviruses?
Well, it depends on
Virus.
where you are. Like if the United States and in Europe and Canada and Australia, where there is not an outbreak, there really isn't anything you can do to necessarily protect against this specific. What you should do, particularly when you're in the winter season, like we are in the United States and in Europe and in Canada, is
Mhm.
there's a lot of flu and other respiratory diseases going on.
Yeah.
Do typical common sense. Wash your hands as often as you possibly can. Avoid crowded places where there are people who are sneezing and coughing, and try to get as much healthy living as possible. That's the thing to do.
What about the advice to the Chinese population?
That's a different story, particularly for people who live in Wuhan, which is the epicenter of this outbreak. You know, the advice is the same thing: wash your hands as often as you can. Wear masks. They're not 100% perfect protected, but they can help. Avoid these open, wet markets where people are selling animals, particularly live animals that can transmit. If you're eating that type of food, make sure you cook it and cook it thoroughly. That's another thing that's really important. And those are really the fundamental, general, healthy things that you can do. Avoid crowded places where there's a lot of people coughing and sneezing.
What about the case that was recently in Seattle with this young man?
Right. I think that was an example of the system working because what we've been doing here in the United States, in addition to screening at 5 airports, by that way, that person came into the country, returned to Seattle before we actually were screening at the airports, at the 5 airports. But nonetheless, our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are trying to get the healthcare providers at the state and local level to be aware that when people come in with respiratory symptoms, fever, cough, to ask them a simple question: have you recently traveled to China, and particularly the Wuhan district? And that's exactly what happened with that young man in Seattle. He noticed that he was feeling badly, he was coughing, he had fever, so he went to a clinic and said, by the way, I just got back from Wuhan. And the physician that he spoke to immediately isolated the person, took a specimen, sent it to the CDC, our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and they made the diagnosis. And now he is in isolation, doing quite well.
Yeah, but he voluntarily would come to the physician and would complain about his conditions. What about people who are coming in, maybe then don't have this kind of, I mean, maybe the virus that they have is not that intense at this particular moment.
But that's the reason if they're coming from Wuhan through the 5 airports, they will be screened actively.
Okay. Hmm.
Wait for them to say. Their temperature will be taken with a machine. They
Hmm.
will question, do you have symptoms? And were you in Wuhan? And or did you have contact with someone suspected of being sick or actually documented as being sick?
Hmm. Right. That's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Fauci.
Quite welcome anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hmm.
Bye bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you again.
Thanks.